A very good morning to friends of Northern Pride out there on this slightly snowy Sunday morning up in Newcastle. Welcome to this first event in our special LGBTQ plus History Month digital programme sponsored by Eldon Square. We are so honoured here this morning to be joined by Olly Pike of Pop and Olly, children's author, entertainer, and we're going to have some book readings this morning. So we're going to have a couple of book readings and a little bit of Q&A with Olly. So I'm going to introduce Olly in. Welcome.
Hello. Hi,
Hello. Good
everyone.
morning.
And thanks for having me.
Very, very, very honoured to have you in today. So we're going to start off with a reading of one of your books called Kenny Lives with Erica and Martina.
Yeah, I'm going to start with this one.
Super. So I'm just going to let you go ahead, and we'll have a little bit of a chat afterwards.
Okay, awesome. Let's take it away. Here we go. Hope you're sitting comfortably. Okay. Kenny lived with his mum Erica and his mummy Martina. They lived in a world where everything was grey. The grass was grey, the sky was grey, the people were grey, and nobody knew any different. But things were about to change. Wow, said Kenny and his mums one morning as they stepped outside and saw something very different. Another house, just like theirs. Only this house wasn't grey at all. It was colourful. Let's see who lives there, said Kenny to his mum and mummy. They knocked on the door and two friendly faces answered. Faces which belonged to Jenny and Hassan. Jenny and Hassan had just moved in. They were a couple and had a very colourful pet cat. The new neighbours chatted and quickly became friends. Kenny really liked his new neighbours. They were nice, so he gave them one of his balloons. Jenny and Hassan were grateful, and in return gave Kenny a box of colourful paints. Kenny and his family had made their new neighbours feel very welcome. However, not everyone was so welcoming. Some of the other people who lived on the street did not want to be friends with Jenny and Hassan at all. In fact, they wanted Jenny and Hassan to leave. You don't belong here, came one angry voice. We don't want you on our street, shouted another. You are too different, said a third. But Jenny and Hassan refused to leave. We belong here too, they called back. This made the people from the street even angrier. No, you can't stay. You'll change everything. You are different and frightening. Suddenly, before Kenny or his mums could do anything, Jenny and Hassan were rudely pushed inside their own home. We don't like different. We don't like change. And we don't want you here. The people from the street were so angry that they decided to build a big grey wall all the way around Jenny and Hassan's house. They were going to pretend that Jenny and Hassan didn't exist by blocking them and their house completely out of sight. Kenny was furious. That's not fair, he shouted as he ran towards the newly finished wall. Kenny tried to push it down, but it was too strong. He tried to climb it, but it was too high. Kenny thought and thought. It was clear that Kenny could not change the wall. Maybe you could try and change the people on our street's minds, said one of Kenny's mums. Yes, maybe they just need someone to help them understand that being different is not something to be scared of, said the other. Then Kenny remembered the paints that Jenny and Hassan had given him. Kenny started to paint immediately. The colours were beautiful. Kenny painted his shoes and his kite and his bike. He painted his balloons and his football and his homework. He painted his clothes and he even painted his socks. Wow, that looks fantastic, said Kenny's friends. Can you paint our stuff? Of course, said Kenny. Aren't colours wonderful? Kenny's friends all agreed, and he started to paint their belongings too. Soon, every child on Kenny Street was riding a colourful bike, or playing with colourful toys, or wearing colourful clothes. The children thought they looked wonderful, but once again, some of the adults just didn't understand. What is the meaning of this? You all look so different. Are you against us? Kenny bravely spoke up. We're not against you, he said. We love our grey world. But don't you see, the world isn't grey for everyone. We can't just pretend that differences don't exist. Instead, we should celebrate them. And with that, Kenny and his friends splashed all of the different colours that they had at the big grey wall. And it looked spectacular. The adults on the street were stunned. They had never seen something so beautiful. Wow, that does look lovely and interesting and exciting and almost familiar, like it's always belonged. Yes, and look, it makes the grey look better too. Maybe colours are okay. No, colours are more than okay, cried Kenny. They are awesome. The whole street cheered at Kenny's words. Then everyone rushed towards the now very colourful wall and began pulling it down. Kenny was so happy and excited now that everyone could be friends with Jenny and Hassan. The last brick was removed and they waited for Jenny and Hassan to come outside. The people from the street were ready to say sorry and welcome their new neighbours. They waited and waited, but Kenny could wait no more. He ran up to the door. Oh, it's unlocked. Kenny crept in. Hello, he called. Jenny and Hassan were gone. It was too late. Kenny began to cry. I know you are sad, said Kenny's mum, and we are too. But look at the street, Kenny. Look at all the colours. You helped to change everyone's mind. You helped to make the world a more colourful place. Jenny and Hassan would be very grateful. Kenny wiped away his tears and thanked his mums. I know what we should do, sniffed Kenny. We should build that wall again. And so they did. But this time, it was at the top of the street. And this time, it was less of a wall and more of a sign, because on it, Kenny had added, everyone is welcome. And Kenny hoped that wherever Jenny and Hassan were, they just might see it. The end. I hope you liked it. That's Kenny Lives with Erica and Martina. You have a copy, yay!
You have a copy, yes. So Northern Pride bought a copy of all your books. So this is what one of them. Get it in the screen. This is one of many of your stories. But Kenny Lives is quite a special book, isn't it? Because you've got a campaign around this book. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that, Olly?
Yeah, I can. So I have a campaign to get a copy of this book into every primary school in the UK. It's going quite well. We've got this book in about 3,000 schools, actually probably more. But yeah, about 3,000 definitely on my like ticker, where I can check them off, which is awesome. And this story is, as you can tell, it's about accepting people's differences. And I think the most important thing for us to realize that although things can change, change takes time, and time isn't something we always have. So that's what this story is about. And yeah.
Yeah, it's such a what I really loved about it is that there are quite hard things to think about in the story, but it's brought about in such a fun way, but also in such a positive way at the end that, like, you know, we might end up in, like you said, that things do take time. We might end up in a situation where, you know, some people might be hurt, like the couple who moved away, but that there are things we can do to make it better and to put that message out there. It's lovely. Um, can you tell us a little bit about your inspiration behind writing Kenny Lives?
Yes. So some people might think that the title is quite familiar, and that's because this book was actually inspired by a previous story called Jenny Lives with Eric and Martin. And that is a story from a Dutch author. And it's about a little girl that lives with two dads. And that story was brought over here to the UK in the 80s. And it was a very innocent black and white children's book. And they did things like go to the laundrette and have a party. But unfortunately, at the time, that book was unfairly vilified as propaganda, and the controversy surrounding it led to the passing of Section 28. And that book subsequently got banned. So that innocent children's book never got to kind of live the life it was meant to, and it never really got to educate any British children about diversity. So that's kind of where this book's kind of come in, and it's not a direct copy, but it's more kind of has been inspired by the events surrounding that book. So yeah, that was the inspiration.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, friends of Northern Pride know that I come from a teaching background, and I do really understand the impact of that Section 28 and what that meant for how confident teachers felt about talking about diversity. So having a resource like this from an educational point of view is really valuable. So it's really fantastic that you've written it and that you have the campaign to get it into every primary school. Are there any ways that you could suggest a teacher could use it in the classroom?
Yeah, lots of different ways. I think the good thing about my books is you can go as deep as you want to with them. So you can just read them as a story at the end of the day, but you can kind of explore them. There is actually a lesson plan in this book at the back for Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. And it just kind of talks through different questions. Like for Key Stage 1, how do you think Jenny and Hassan felt when they saw the wall around their house? Very simple ideas. For Key Stage 2, you can go a little bit deeper with it and talk about if a wall was built around your school or home to keep you separate, how would you feel? So yeah, there's kind of different levels of learning with the lesson ideas and stuff, discussion points at the back.
Amazing. So it really is just a resource that a teacher can take off the shelf and roll with there, because you've got those suggested activities in the back.
Definitely. And I also have the worksheets as well for members at popandolly.com. So if you go to popandolly.com/membership, you get access to loads of lesson plans and principal worksheets, which relate to like all of my stories and have been going down very well with teachers.
Super. So I just noticed you holding up Prince Henry there, which we also have a copy of. So it's one of many resources that you have, but it's one of many books that you've written as well. So we're going to have a second reading of Prince Henry. So I'm gonna let you take that away, and then maybe we'll have a little bit more of a Q&A afterwards.
Definitely. Let's go for it. Okay, we're ready. Prince Henry. This is special to me because this was my first ever book. So yeah, here we go. Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, lived a young prince called Henry. He lived in a big castle with his parents, who were the king and queen. Henry loved being a prince. It was awesome. He got to do a lot of cool, exciting things, like riding fire-breathing dragons and rescuing lots of woodland animals. He even got to attend lots of royal parties, but Henry found it more fun to sneak out of them. Henry didn't know many people, but the people he did know, he cared for very much. One of these people was his faithful servant, Thomas. Thomas had been the prince's servant a long time, and they had become very good friends. They did everything together. They shared the same interests. And Thomas was always there to help Prince Henry with his royal duties, or at least help him to get out of them. Thomas did not own much, nor did he have a lot of money. But Henry cared for Thomas so much that he would often share his wealth with him and surprise him with ridiculously cool gifts. Now, Henry's father and mother believed the time had come for Henry to marry. They were very keen to find someone special for their only son to spend his life with. So the king sent out secret invitations to all the royal princes and princesses in the land, inviting them to the kingdom so that Henry could choose one of them to marry. And the little invitation reads, "Dear Prince or Princess, I hereby cordially invite you to our kingdom so that our son may choose his future husband or wife." A few days later, Henry was awoken by a huge buzz of noise beneath his bedroom window. He sleepily climbed out of bed and opened the curtains. Wow! Prince Henry could hardly believe his eyes. Princes and princesses, hundreds of them. It was quite an impressive sight. Wow, look at all the different princesses and princes there, right underneath Prince Henry's bedroom window. Henry couldn't get ready quick enough. He had to know why they were all here. Thomas helped the prince get ready. Henry thanked him and then dashed outside. Hello everyone. Welcome to our kingdom, said Henry to the excited crowd. I hope you don't mind me asking, but what are you all doing here? The crowd all looked very puzzled. And then came one voice. It was Henry's father. "They are here, my son, so that you can choose one of them to marry and spend your life with. I invited them here for you." Henry paused and thought for a moment. He realized that his father was trying to do something nice for him. So he replied, "Thank you, Father. That was very thoughtful of you. I'm sure these are all lovely people, but I already know who I want to spend my life with." "You do? How wonderful," said the king. "Yes," said Henry. "I wish to marry Thomas." "What?" said the king. Thomas started to turn red. He had liked Henry for a very long time, but did not realize that the prince felt the same way. The king started to turn red too, but for a very different reason. He was angry. "But you can't marry Thomas. He is your servant. That is against our law and our tradition. A prince can only marry another prince or princess. Thomas is poor and you are rich. You are not equal." "Oh," said Henry. "Well, in that case, I do not want to be a prince anymore. The king and everyone was shocked. I am sorry, father. I love you very much. But I must be allowed to marry the person of my choice. If I cannot, then I do not want to be a prince any longer. You may not think we are equal, because I am rich and Thomas is poor, but we are. We all are. Every human being, no matter how rich or poor or different or similar. We are all worth the exact same. We are all priceless, said Henry confidently. I want to spend my life with someone whom I love and who I know will make me very happy. That is, if he wants to spend his life with me. At this point, Thomas didn't think his cheeks could get any redder, but they did. The king's anger quickly faded after hearing his son speak, and he started to cry. Henry's speech had made him very proud. My dear boy, please forgive me. No one has ever taught me this before, and I can now see how much you love Thomas. All I really want is for you to be happy. After all, that is what is important. The king then hugged his son, and his son hugged him back. And with that, the king ripped the royal law into 100 pieces and threw them into the sky. The crowd of princes and princesses cheered, and everyone was very happy. So, said Henry, returning his crown to his head, what do you say, Thomas? And Henry took him by the hand. Will you marry me? Now, it was Thomas's turn to think. He thought very carefully. He looked at Henry, smiled, and said, No. No, repeated Henry. No, questioned Henry's parents. No, gasped the crowd. No, confirmed Thomas. Or rather, not yet, he continued. We've got too many adventures ahead of us yet. We have dragons to ride, woodland animals to save, and lots of parties to sneak out of. Why must we rush? We are already happy. You're right, as always, said Henry as he hugged Thomas. And who knows, said Thomas, perhaps in 1 year, or 5, or even 10, maybe, just maybe, I'll ask you. Some years later, on a day that was good, a small crowd did gather in a space in the wood. They watched a young couple celebrate their love by wedding each other. They'd put it off long enough. One was a prince and the other was not. But which one was which? It was soon forgot. For they were so in love, their tale needed no sequel. Once thought of as different, but their love was always equal. And then there's a last little picture at the end. Yay! So they eventually did tie the knot and got married. There we go.
Yay! Oh, I love that story so much. It's there's loads of little messages in there, but I'd particularly like right at the end that Henry doesn't say yes. It isn't that sort of fairy tale stereotype, but that it's this different kind of fairy tale where people have their adventures and they might get married, they might not. If they do that stuff, but yeah. Fantastic. Oh, so you said that Henry was your first book that you ever wrote. That leads me to a question I really wanted to ask you, which is how did you get into writing kids' books around diversity or writing for children in general?
Well, my background is in theatre and entertainment, and I used to do a lot of children's theatre and some television. So I've always kind of loved that world of make-believe, because it's very fantastical and fairy tale orientated sometimes. And I kind of just started making my own stuff on YouTube, for fun. It was just kind of like silly stuff. But it wasn't until I made one episode on my channel, LGBT plus, like inclusive, that it really kind of started to take off, and people were watching it and sharing it and using it in schools, which was a surprise to me at the time. And it kind of just showed me that this type of inclusive content is really needed and wanted. So I just kind of went with it and started creating the type of stories that I needed when I was younger, like Prince Henry, because if I'd have had that book when I was younger, it would have made life a lot easier.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I can imagine it's quite rewarding for you as well to hear all that positive feedback and see that this is something that people have a real appetite for.
Definitely. And I think Prince Henry is quite a personal book, and that's the book. I guess I did write that for myself, but with my other stories, as I'm on this journey, I'm like, okay, well, who else needs a story? Who else needs to be represented? And that's why I've done books like Princess Penny, which is about treating people how they want to be treated. I've got my transgender Cinderella story as well. I've got Goldilocks and the Five Bear Families, and this is a really simple book about just different types of families. That's a really fun one. But yeah, it's really important for me now, because I'm kind of in a place where, I'm able to do this, create books and create stories. And it's like, I need to stand up for other people as well, like Kenny does. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things I really love about your stories is they are clearly about inclusiveness and accepting everybody for who they are, but it's almost done in a kind of a really natural way. It's not making it really obvious that this is about LGBT plus inclusion, or this is about whatever kind of inclusion you might be talking about. I quite like the way it's very normalizing. Did you particularly want to take that sort of route with it, or is it just something that came naturally?
Yeah, definitely, because it's like, being gay is normal to me. So the last thing I want to do is write a story that others it. It's like, let's just make it usual, because it is usual for a lot of people. And that's what my stories do best, I think. They just familiarize different types of people without making an example of them. It's like, oh, that character's trans, but that's not really what the story's about. Or that character's in a wheelchair, but, that's not what the story's about. It's about the person and their personality and their journey.
Absolutely, yeah. I think one thing I really particularly love, another thing I really particularly love about Henry is the fact that it's just normalizing the fact that that the prince could marry, a boy, a girl, a prince, a princess, anyone, and that was the expectation. It was actually a different expectation around like status that the king had, and it was kind of brought in that way, that no matter what we're kind of judging people for, it's still important to remember that we're all equal, and that it's any sort of inequality is the same.
Definitely.
So you've talked a lot about your inspiration behind it, the fact that it would have been something that would have been good for you to have heard more at school, and then sort of thinking about that and the journey that you're on with trying to support schools in particular, and I guess families, to talk about inclusion more. Have you faced any challenges with this work?
Yeah, a little bit. Not like, I would say 90% is like incredibly positive. But there was a time a few years ago when I was getting a lot of stick online from various hate channels on YouTube. They were like, saying really mean stuff about me, which is a new experience. But luckily, kind of like YouTube has kind of stepped in now, and it's like, well, if you're going to make that type of content, you can't make money from it because it's kind of inciting hate. So actually that sort of stuff's kind of stopped a little bit, but I know there's still kind of groups out there which kind of oppose what I'm doing. I would say people that are the only really negative stuff I get now, unfortunately, is from a small minority of trans, exclusionary, radical feminists. Whenever I do anything about trans or gender, they normally really dislike it. But, it's really important that we stand up for trans people and non-binary people at the moment and forever.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, you know, the worrying trend at the moment is that there seems to be that uptick in transphobia and prejudice towards people that you know don't conform to binary genders. And I definitely agree that it's something that we need to do more support of in terms of, you know, schools working on that
Yeah.
level of inclusion. And you mentioned that you do have a book with a story around a trans character, which is Jamie, isn't it? So
Yeah.
it's a Cinderella themed story, isn't it?
Yeah, because the reality is there are some transgender children and there's some gender non-conforming children, and they deserve to be represented, or elements of them represented in stories as well. And other children need to see that people like this exist. And I think the most important thing with young children when it comes to gender is just letting them know that there are no gender stereotypes. You can like what you like. Don't separate things. It's just everything's for everyone, and that way you just make the world a little bit bigger for everyone, and because you give them more options.
Yeah, it's such important work that you're doing, and I think thinking about, you know, the initial inspiration behind Kenny being the book that incited the Section 28 clause that made it hard for teachers to talk about inclusion in the past, and thinking about current trends now, and worrying a little bit that teachers might feel unconfident talking about, you know, issues around gender identity, and that's sort of becoming an area where you know, I don't know if your fingers crossed it won't become a second Section 28, but there are, you know, things coming through the DfE which are making it unclear as to what teachers can talk about. And so I think resources like yours are so valuable in creating that positive space where teachers have something that they can pick up and feel confident about explaining these topics to young people.
Yeah, and letting teachers know that they can use these books. Just talking about the DfE and the government guidance, like finally in the government guidance now for relationship education, it does very smallly mention LGBT plus families, but it is there in black and white, that at primary schools you need to teach about different types of families, and that includes LGBT plus families. It says it in the government guidance. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
there's definitely a sort of a you know, this push towards making sure that that's included in there, because how can you talk about diverse families if you don't include everybody? And there are going to be young
there, first of all, and I think that's why there was a lot of do you remember there was some protests in Birmingham, and then it was a bit of a grey area. It's like, what does that mean? Like, diverse families, what does that mean? You haven't explicitly said LGBT plus, but you know, after lots of people, including myself, actually went into Parliament and spoke about these things, they have changed the guidance now, which is great, because it's like, no, look, it's in black and white. You need to teach about LGBT plus families.
Amazing, yeah. So you know, it sounds like Pop and Olly does quite a lot of work. It's not just the books. You've got resources online that can be accessed through a membership, and there are videos on YouTube as well, I believe. Is there anything else that you can offer to not just teachers, to families that might want to include this more in the work that they do for their kids?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you've mentioned a lot of it, but like you said, there's hundreds of videos on YouTube, and they're all free. They're always going to be free. There's stories, there's history lessons, there's silly comedy videos, there's songs. Obviously, we've got the books, we've got posters at popandolly.com. There is a membership area which has tons of resources which you can download and print out. But also, we have a free resources area at popandolly.com, which is just free resources, and you can print out colouring in. You can print out ears like this, which you literally just print out, and you can make your own Pop and Olly ears. So there's like fun stuff to do as well. And then for any educators out there, I also have a podcast called Equality Education, which I think is really useful for educators in terms of talking to things about the law, about how to come out at school as a teacher, about kind of really kind of important stuff that you need to know the fine details of, and that's what that podcast is for.
Oh, fantastic. So the podcast sounds like it'd be a really valuable resource. I think I certainly know from my own experience, like, because I used to be a teacher, and that you know, being yourself at school as a teacher can be very, very hard as well, you know.
Yeah, I have a great interview on there with a head teacher of 3 different schools, talking about his experience and how his advice to other teachers who want to come out of school and aren't sure how to do that. So yeah, that would be useful maybe.
Super. So what do you have planned for the future, and what are your hopes for the future right now? I know we're in a very strange space where we don't have too many expectations, but what have you got planned up?
Oh, like lots of stuff. I mean, I'm always going to be making more videos and resources, but I am working on a new book, which I think is going to be very useful for teachers. And it's my first non-fiction book. And it's basically a really simple guide to what LGBT plus means. But having said that, I feel like when you answer the question, what does LGBT plus mean? You can't just answer it. There's more layers to it, because it kind of brings into like, well, what is gender? What is identity? And so this book does, in the most simple way, explains like what identity is, what sexuality is, what love is, what gender is, and it throughout this book, it basically answers the question, what does LGBT plus mean, and any other sub questions which would probably come off of that. So hopefully I'll be launching that this year. And some of the chapters have already been turned into videos, and you can see on my channel, there's a video about identity and sexuality and love, and that's basically one of the chapters of the books. So you can get a very good idea of what the book is going to be about by watching those videos.
Super. Oh, that sounds really, really interesting. I'm quite excited to see that when it comes out. I'm gonna go ahead and have a look at the videos that are already up there on YouTube. So, you know, thank you so much for coming on this morning and giving a reading. I think, you know, the work that you're doing is incredibly needed and incredibly vital. We are on a journey when it comes to inclusion. You know, things are getting better, but we need people like you producing the material that you are, and putting that message out. So thank you so much, Olly. Do you have any final last messages to so we might have children watching this morning, we'll certainly have parents and educators watching as well. Do you have any final messages?
I would say yes, if you can, be like Kenny and be true to yourself, but remember to stand up for other people and look after each other. So remember to do that. Can I do a little plug for my books as well?
Yeah, do.
So if you want to get copies of these, you can get them at popandolly.com. And I'll give you a promo code. If you use the promo code OLLYFRIEND, OLLY friend, you can get 15% off on any order, whether it's books or posters or whatever. So yeah, enjoy the rest of Northern Pride this month, and or LGBT plus History Month with Northern Pride. And it looks like it's going to be awesome. So have fun, everyone.
Thank you so much, Olly, and thank you everybody who tuned in this morning. So this was our first event for digital LGBTQ plus History Month, sponsored by Eldon Square, and we have events coming up through the month. We've got one on Saturday the 13th, which is next Saturday at 6 p.m. This is a music event, so we're going to have MXYM who will host and perform alongside some of the best LGBTQ plus musicians, singers and songwriters. And what it's themed around is singing songs and talking about the queer icons that have inspired them. So that's going to be a really nice music-based event for next weekend. Later on in the month, I'm going to be chatting. So we heard Olly talk a little bit about Section 28, which was legislation from the past that made it difficult for teachers to talk about diversity and talk about diverse families. So we're going to have a panel discussion talking about the history of that piece of legislation, why it was brought in, why it was later repealed, and the journey that you know we're on as a country in terms of healing from the impact of that. So that's coming up later this month. We also have have another discussion panel speaking to our fantastic heroes, the veterans, the service personnel that work with emergency services in our local area, and talking about the importance for them to be able to be out and proud, and their sort of inclusion journey in that sector. We will have an in-depth conversation with Dom from My Generation, talking about the ongoing fight to improve the Gender Recognition Act. So we spoke a little bit today about, you know, the challenges that the trans community are facing in terms of their rights, but also increasing transphobia, and so there'll be a very important discussion around that coming up. And we'll also be having Michael Madsen, as he brings out our History Month program. So he brings our History Month program to an end, talking about queer icons on the 26th of February. So we've got quite a few events lined up, and there may be more. So do watch this space. All dates and times of those events will be available on our social media. Do make sure you're following us at Northern Pride UK. So enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everybody. Thanks again, Olly, for joining us today. We'll definitely be supporting your Kenny Lives campaign to get books into schools. So, and then if the audience can support as well, we had their website pop up earlier, but we can certainly share that on our socials. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. See you later.